Hello, plant friends. Hope you guys are all staying happy and well out there in real life land. In this episode, I will be talking about three, I think I consider healthy habits, good habits that I feel are not talked about in regards to planting. And maybe they're a little underappreciated, but I feel are actually pretty darn important. So my first good habit is regular pruning, right? So this means looking at your plants, cutting off the dead leaves or the wilting leaves, unattractive leaves. I know that this channel we talked a lot about Monstera, and we talked about that burning or browning of leaves is very natural. For the most part, I don't. I just kind of leave them until yellowing or browning or burning is about 50% of the leaf. If we're talking about variegated Monstera, that 50% I will take into account if that's like 50% of just an all white part, or if 50% of a green part that will do something for the plant that will provide energy with photosynthesis. If I feel that the plant is a lot of the green part is gone or 50% of it is gone or more, then I will cut it off, because I feel like at that point then the plant is using more energy to sustain the leaf than the leaf is providing for the plant. So that's sort of how I make my judgment call. I think about, is this leaf useful for the plant anymore now that it's yellow and browning or so? And I draw my line at the 50% mark. Is it a science? Not really. I think at some point about the 50% mark or so or above, I get really tired of looking at that leaf, or it starts to really bother me. So that's when I chop off leaves. I think regular pruning is good because it lets the plant focus you know on sustaining the good leaves, right? The sustaining the leaves that is contributing to the plant. I also think that regular pruning is good because when you notice that the leaves are going bad, you can get a really close, or you should get a really close look at that leaf to see if it's just a natural leaf that's just naturally gone bad, or if it's something else. Like sometimes I notice that some leaves they get really crisp and burnt or so, and then when I look at it and I think about it, I'm like, oh, it's too close to the heater, or it's too close to a really warm spot or something. Um, or sometimes I find a plant that the leaves are they're going bad, and I realize that that plant is just in an environment where there's low air circulation and the soil is just retaining too much water, and then that's like, oh, it might be root rot, right? So I think that every single time when we prune, and it gives us an opportunity to check up on our plant as well as the leaves to figure out if it's an environmental issue or if it's a pest issue, right? So every time you're like chopping off a leaf or you're seeing a leaf that's bad, take a look at it. It might be, it might be bugs. That's kind of how sometimes I find like spider mites or other bugs. It's just kind of like, oh, it's just a really bad leaf for no apparent reason, and I take a closer look, and it's a bug. It's a pest issue, right? So I think regular pruning or consistent pruning helps with the health of your plant, helps you detect early problems like pests or environmental issues, and then I think it also makes it look pretty, right? So that's my first habit is regular or consistent pruning. I definitely don't do enough of that, but do as I say and not as I prune. The next habit I want to talk about is a little controversial, I feel, and this is proactive pest control. This is not something that I'm particularly good at doing myself. So again, do as I say and not as I practice. But I really feel like it's a really good practice. I think that every 2, 3, maybe every month or so, spray or treat your plants with a pesticide, or however you treat or decide to treat your pests. I think regularly doing it or being mindful of it every month at the least really saves a lot of people lots of headaches. I think for me, what happens is that whenever I get a pest control or pest problem, I treat, and then 2 weeks later I treat again, and then 2 weeks later I treat again, and then once the pest is controlled, I kind of forget about it for months, and then the pests come back, and then when they come back, not only does that cause me stress or anxiety, it also is harmful for my plants, right? So it's like my plants take a step back because of my laziness, and and then I sort of have to repeat the process. It's probably much better for me to just treat or spray my plants every month or so to just kind of really have the steady control of the pests and prevent big infestations. So that's something that I need to get better at. I think it's a really good habit to have, and if you're already doing that, you're much better than me. I think that the main controversy is whether or not the pests will develop resistance. I think for the home gardener, especially the home indoor gardener like myself, I don't think it's an issue. I haven't really heard of it being an issue by anyone. Yes, it is a concern, but I think that from what I understand of insects and fungi and the chemicals we use to treat them, it's extremely hard for them. Yes, I would say it's pretty hard for them to develop resistance, and it's different. This is much different from antibiotics and bacteria. It's a bit of a different ball game, and it's a bit of a different when we're talking about how pesticides and antifungals work. It's a different mechanism and a different approach than antibacterials and antibiotics, right? And bacteria developing resistance that way. The bacterial aspect is much more likely to happen and much more readily happens. So I think in terms of resistance, I don't think that should be a major concern for a lot of us. So that's my second good habit, is to proactively and regularly treat for pests and fungi. Okay, my third good habit might be even more controversial, and that is to make things look pretty. So, and I think when we're talking about making things look pretty, I think what I focus on is like the vibe, right? The atmosphere that you want, that you like. Rather it's like a jungly vibe or a viney vibe or a chaotic plants all over the place vibe. You do you, right? You figure out what works the best for you, what brings you the most joy, what gives you the most sense of peace or whatever, and then trim and prune and make your setup whatever way that works for that. Plant accessories. Do that, right? Make things look pretty for you, right? Make the vibe work for you. And I think that this is a good habit that I think probably a lot of people do, and some people sort of don't think about it, or they kind of like brush it off, or they don't think it's important. And I think that it's probably a lot more important than people think. I think if you're thinking about a hobby that's years long, a long-term hobby that requires us to do a lot of cares, right? Such as pruning or pesticides or watering, lighting, right? Like there are so many things in the hobby that causes stress or requires us to do effort and stuff. I think doing anything that increases the joy, the pleasure that we get from the plants helps, right? So I think that making a good aesthetic or a good vibe or an atmosphere with your plants, rather that's pruning them a certain way, or making them trail a certain way, or buying certain accessories, or fun pots, or basically anything like that. Anything that makes them more appealing and fun and enjoyable for you is a good habit to have, right? And I think that in the long term, it really pays off. It prevents burnout. It really keeps the hobby enjoyable, right? So that's my last tip, is make things look pretty for you. All right, so recap, the 3 tips are the 3 good habits I feel that are not talked about as much or are underrated. What was number 1? 1 is regularly pruning. Number 2 was, I forgot already. Proactive pest control. And number 3 is regularly, just making things look pretty, maintaining your aesthetic and vibe. I'm not sure if I talked about my shirt yet. This Leave shirt is on my Amazon storefront, as well as Teespring. It should be around this video somewhere. Right. And if you like it, get one, support the channel. That's it. So that's it for this episode, guys. Hope you found it helpful. Till next time, happy planting.